My name is Juliana Nicolasian with the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is Friday, December 7th, 2007, and I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, interviewing Ginny Creveling. This interview is being conducted as part of the inductees of the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame Oral History Project. Creveling was inducted into the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame in 2007. She is a community activist and civic leader who has devoted much of her work to helping women, children, and families. With a long list of community involvement and honors to match, Creveling is deeply involved in the Tulsa community and was recognized in 2006 as Tulsan of the Year by Tulsa People magazine. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, let's begin. I'd like you to start. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and your early life as a child.
I was born in the Philippines to Filipino parents. My father was in the Filipino Army, commissioned on the battlefield into the U.S. Army, which at that time automatically made him a U.S. citizen, which then, when he married my mother, made her a U.S. citizen, which when our children were born were U.S. citizens. So we came to the United States. My father stayed with the U.S. Army, not as naturalized citizens, but already citizens of the U.S., which is a little different today, I think. Being in a military family, we traveled across the United States a lot. I think Japan was really the only place I got to live. And as young children do, picked up the language pretty easily. So at one point in my life, unfortunately, only until I was about 7 or 10, I could speak 3 languages. And now I do well to speak English properly. I have a middle of 7 children. I have a sister and 5 brothers. Currently, we're scattered from Florida to Texas, but most of us are in California, where my mother is. And I find myself in Tulsa, Oklahoma, because my father was once stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And I went to school at the university. I graduated from Lawton High School, went to school at the University of Oklahoma. Loved Oklahoma so much that when I left here, I went back to California for a couple of years. When there was a choice to be made as to where to live, I chose to come back to Oklahoma. I find myself in Tulsa because drove up here one weekend. We were so poor, my husband coming back from Vietnam and not having a job. We were going to take a little mini weekend vacation and came to Tulsa, stayed at the Camelot Hotel, which I think is being torn down today, as a matter of fact, as a public nuisance because it's been a neglected and abandoned building for so long. But at the time, it was a castle. It was 1969. It was fabulous. We ate at the Pagoda restaurant across the street, and we just thought Tulsa was the best. We borrowed enough money to move, to pay for a month's deposit on the rent, to pay a month's rent, and moved without a job, set about getting a job, and here we are.
Wow. Let's travel back to when you were a little girl, and I know you moved around a lot. Tell me about some of your favorite subjects in school when you were younger.
Always English. I loved English. I love languages, actually. I also really enjoyed history.
And did you find yourself attending large schools or small schools? Describe for me the types of schools, your elementary schools and your junior highs that you attended in your high school. Were they large or were they small? What kind of population did you find yourself in?
As a military family living on military bases or in the cities next to military bases, they generally tend to be fairly large communities. I don't think I ever lived in a community that was really, really big, though, like Los Angeles or Dallas, but they're fairly large. Lawton at the time was the 3rd largest city, Lawton, where I graduated from high school, in Oklahoma. I guess there are long stories and lots of factors there, but Lawton is not the large city one might expect it to be given the military base that's there. But they were mostly, I guess, middle-sized. Lawton High School, when I graduated from there, was the only high school in Lawton. So now I think there are 3 or 4 others.
Did you ever feel out of place or like you didn't fit in or like you weren't from around here?
That's an interesting question. I just read something my daughter wrote where she said that she did feel that way, and that's an interesting question. I'm sure I did, and I know there were things that would have been hard to ignore. For instance, I think I've cited this before. I recall traveling with my family in the late 50s across the Deep South from a military base in California to Fort Lee, Virginia. And when we would stop for a rest break, finding restrooms and water fountains marked whites or colored and having to ask my parents where I was supposed to go. So yes, and knowing I was neither white nor colored, as a child, not really knowing, it was really ignorance, asking where I was supposed to go. So that certainly did point out that there was something different about me. Being in high school and having a boyfriend tell me that his parents didn't want him to date me anymore because I was not white. So yes, but I really think I would have to say that it did not, that those thoughts did not possess my thinking all the time. I just was not, it's not something that occupied my thinking most of the time. I was the oldest of 7 kids. Both my parents worked. My mom worked nights and I had to take care of the kids. I just think there were other distractions. So it's nothing I think I dwelled on, although it was part and parcel of my life and part and parcel of who makes me who I am today and how I think today.
Well, what was occupying your mind when you were younger outside of not really paying too much attention to the differences?
I think just I had a lot of responsibilities as a child, and a lot of that is, to understand that, one would have to have a cultural understanding that in our family and coming from our background, whoever's the oldest child has the greater responsibility. So, and I have my youngest brothers are twins. They are the 6th and 7th children of the family, dividable by, I think, 2.5 minutes, whatever it is. And yet that older twin bosses around the younger twin. So that's the hierarchy in our culture. And so I think I had a lot of responsibilities. My father was overseas and gone most of the time, leaving my mother with most of the work and around the house. And because she worked, a lot of that fell to me. When I look back on it, and maybe by today's standards, there would be some people who would think that's unnecessarily, that would be unfair to give a child that much responsibility. So there were a lot of things I couldn't do, but because I didn't know about it, I didn't miss it. So those things are what occupied my time, or just having to get home in time for my mother to leave for work. So I think my bus rolled home at 2:30. She had to leave for work by 3, so I had that much time to get home. And then there were those 2 babies to take care of, and the other kids, and supper to put on the table. It makes me sound pretty ancient, but yeah.
You had lots of family responsibilities.
And that was just life as we knew it, and we did what we had to do to make that life work.
Sure, and I think it was during a time where other people were in similar situations with their own families, where the older children had to take care of the younger children. So,
and it wasn't so unusual in my environment, because remember, we were military families. There were a lot of military families that were facing similar life situations, and we all were just trying to make life work the way we could make it work.
So in between juggling, taking care of the family and helping out with that, what did you really want to be when you grew up? Well, when you were younger, what did you think you wanted to be?
Juliana, I'm going to probably be the worst interview you ever had, because I don't know that I had dreams and aspirations, which makes me, sound like a pretty uninsightful person. I don't know that I did. I had very limited exposure. We didn't get to travel much. unlike my children who, when they were young, got to go snow skiing, and we had, a boat and they could water. I mean, they had so much more exposure and travel, and I didn't have any of that, so there weren't those kinds of enticements. I've had a really, I've had really wonderful experiences and adventures in my life, but I've just been real lucky. I've just really kind of lucked into everything I've gotten to do. The great jobs I've gotten to do, the great people I've gotten to work with, all really just by luck that I have found myself in circumstances that I have gotten to work with people who are incredibly bright and talented and have taught me a lot. But as far as at some point in my life saying, golly, I'd sure like to work in that kind of a job and know those kind of people, I don't know that ever occurred to me.
Well, did you have any people you looked up to when you were younger that inspired you?
I was always an idealist. I say that because, maybe all children picture themselves to be, in some situation they get to be a hero or something, like the people you read about and see in the movies and TV, and you picture yourself doing those kinds of things. But I can't point out any particular person to you. But I will say that having lived this long, I think those kinds of heroes and those heroics we probably see every day, except they're not necessarily billboard names. They're just really ordinary people who do the extraordinary things that people do every day to make life terrific and to make life better for a lot of people who don't have it as well.
Tell me a little bit about the role in your family, the role your family plays in your life now. We know how we kind of have a picture of the importance of family when you were younger, but what does family mean to you now?
I have the most remarkable family. I have a United Nations family. As you know, we're all Filipino. Both parents are Filipino, but I have an African American sister-in-law, a Chinese brother-in-law, we have Japanese sister-in-law, we have, I think, 4 or 5 different faiths, including Jehovah's Witness and Buddhist. So we have a remarkable family, and the most wonderful thing about our families, our children are incredible people. They're bright, they're adventuresome, they're not afraid of much, they're very accomplished, very kind children. And so I think given the way that we were raised as children, the hardships, and I really am reluctant to almost say that because so many people suffer hardships that ours don't seem like anything by comparison, given the ones that we had to deal with. I think our family is pretty remarkable. But my family is my touchstone, because sometimes, particularly in the kind of job I have had, where you get to go to social functions that are pretty elaborate, the kinds of job opportunities and volunteer opportunities I've had, just as an example, getting to be part of an escort team that both welcomed and said farewell to President Clinton and First Lady Hillary Clinton at the time they were here in '93, those kinds of things. My family's my touchstone because I never do forget, how from where I came, and that I get to do that sort of thing makes me appreciate it so much more, how lucky I am.
Was education important in your family? Did your parents encourage you to go to college and get a degree?
Of ultimate importance. My father did not have a college degree. He was in the Army Young, Filipino Army. My mother did have a degree. Coming to this country, though, my mother's degree as a teacher was not recognized. so she never really did. She never taught in this country. We were of modest means. My father was a first sergeant. He had a large family, so we were to public schools, and in terms of colleges, there really probably wasn't the money for it. It was expensive for all of us, but all that to say that somehow my mother and father divorced probably when I was just out of high school. But somehow, just out of sheer will, she made sure that 5 of us got through school, and 3 of us have higher degrees. So I don't know how she did it. And the 2 that don't have degrees was by their choice, that they haven't finished. I mean, one of them works for the University of California, could go to school tuition free, and is at a place in his life where he doesn't feel he needs it. But that was at my mother's insistence that we all finish high school for one, and that some of us were able to go to college and finish those degrees.
Well, tell me a little bit about your college days, what school you went to, what you studied.
Went to the University of Oklahoma and was in a nursing program there for a couple of years. My mother got ill, and she was in California at that time, so I went home to help care for her. And then came back to Oklahoma, married. At that time I was married, and when my children were young enough to be in school, I started going back to school, and I took a class a semester, or whatever I could handle, and it took me 10 years since I restarted, but I finally did get my degree in nursing from the University of Tulsa. And so it took me, I got it in 84. I graduated from high school in 64, so it took me 20 years to get that degree. But I did eventually finish.
Why nursing?
Oh, I've been evading that and by omission. But I will tell you since you asked. In the Philippines, because of the socioeconomic conditions there, the only escape out of poverty is through education. And the most respected professions there are doctors or lawyers, and for women, teachers or nurses. And that was, in those days. And so that's what you had to be. And nurses even more than teachers. Doctors maybe even more than lawyers. And so when I got out of high school in Lawton, I said I wanted to be a teacher. And my mother said, "You're going to be a nurse." I said, "I don't want to be a teacher." She said, "If you don't go to nursing school, I'm sending you back to the Philippines." That is a true story. And so, and it does not make my mother sound it's not very favorable thing to say about my mother, but my mother's an amazing woman, amazing. If I could have half the sheer willpower and half the courage she had raising her children, I would have lived a pretty good life.
Well, I'm sure she was very proud when you got that nursing degree.
Finally. She was. And if you asked her about this, I'm sure she would have no recollection of ever having been that insistent with me, but indeed that is how it happened. And again, as part of our culture, I didn't rebel. As children might today, I just said, all right.
Now you went and earned your MBA in 2000.
I did.
Was that tough going back to school?
I'm telling you, I'm not really the most interesting or impressive person. At the time, I was single. My children were grown and gone, and I did not have grandchildren really at the time. And I was working. I loved my job, but I had time, and so I had time to do something with, and it was either that or a bowling league. And the company wouldn't pay for bowling, but they had an educational agreement, so I went to school. That also is a true story.
Did you feel your MBA has definitely helped in your career now?
I think it certainly helps in terms of I like school for the things it teaches you, not for the processes it teaches you, for the expansion of your mind it gives you, not necessarily for specific things that you learn. And so the ability to analyze and the ability to think beyond certain frameworks, yes, I definitely think a master's program helped me a lot. And yes, it was very difficult. In nursing school, there are really very few, and I don't really remember any electives because you have to take all these medical related subjects, and so I didn't have finance and accounting and things like that, so I had a lot of prerequisites that I had to take before I could even really begin my master's program. And yes, it was hard.
Well, I'd like you to kind of take me through your career up to this point. I'd like you to describe for me the different places you've worked and what you did, and if you could elaborate on that for me, please.
My job with Roanoke is the only career job I've ever really had other than being a mother. I told you it took me so long to get my degree. I was lucky when I got the degree. I did have a choice of working or not working, and I chose not to work. My children were little at the time, and I chose to be a full-time stay-at-home mother, which I will say, I believe if anybody, is the most challenging as well as the most rewarding job any woman can ever accept. And I think that stay-at-home moms should be credited with helping to hold together the fabric of our society, because it does make a difference to be home and be with the children. That doesn't mean to say that working moms don't have that, can't be credited with the same. It's just a lot more difficult for working moms, and they're even greater heroes, I think, for that. So all that being said, I did a lot of volunteer work as a stay-at-home mom. One of those volunteer jobs, because of who was on my committee, led to being offered a job with the Westin Hotel. And I ended up being the PR director for the Westin Hotel here in Tulsa for about 8 years, working part-time. And the life situation was such that the Westin Hotel was sold. At the very same time, I was going to be single, and also at the same time that both my kids were out of high school and out of the house, and it made it a time to enter another kind of job. I was lucky, again, as I told you, I've always been lucky. The governor's meeting, National Governors Association meeting, was here in Tulsa in '93. Now that is a very important meeting that happens somewhere in the country every year. And it's a meeting of all the governors of all the states in our 5 territories. And in this particular year, it was '93. Almost all the governors were here, including President Clinton and Vice President Gore. We didn't really know they were going to come until kind of the last minute meeting, just a couple months before it actually happened. It was already a very complicated event, but what was so interesting about that is once the president and then the vice president were going to be here, my gosh, the Secret Service layer that goes over everything is just incredible. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I'm really lucky to have been able to do it. But anyway, so at that time when the Westin sold, that job just became immediately available. And the reason I was able to get that job is I had just graduated from Leadership Oklahoma, and one of my classmates was named the coordinator and asked me to be the staffing, to head the staffing for it. And so how lucky can that be that there was already a job for me to do? And so I did that, and then when that was over, that was to be over in August of '93. In May of that year, I realized that once that meeting was over, I would not have a job, nor any income. And so at that time, I started visiting friends that I knew at different places, different companies, just to ask them what the horizon might be, and where they think I might fit in somewhere. And these were friends who I'd worked with in some volunteer capacity or another. Larry Brummett and I had worked on Leadership Tulsa board together, and Roanoke had given me a cadre of volunteers to use for the governor's meeting. So, naturally, they were one of the places I went. They offered me a job that they created for me in community relations and agreed to hold it for me until August. And so when I was through the governor's meeting, I went directly to ONEOK. It was the job I wanted because everybody I had ever talked to who worked at ONEOK always said how much they loved working there. It was like family, and so I was really lucky to get that job. And now I've been there for about 13 years. I've always been in a community relations aspect. The foundation was established in 1997, and I've been there since the beginning of it as its executive director. That's been a really fun job because being there right at the beginning, I was able to be involved in the establishment of policies and procedures and formats and in goals and objectives and priorities, and it's evolved. It is a very important aspect of ONEOK, and I think what reflects that is that the Foundation Board of Directors is made up of our CEO and Chairman of the Board and our CFO and our General Counsel. It's made up of the top executive management of the company, and so it's a very important part of our business strategy to meet goals. It is not just a giving program to us. It's very much a way that we become part of the community.
Well, that's great. That's makes you probably feel good to go to bed at night.
I do have a great job. What is so wonderful about this job is I think, as I told you, I come from a volunteer background. And so I'm able to come from a volunteer background and have that perspective, and also have the perspective of the corporate entity and the partnership between the community and its corporate community, and then also it's our governmental agency. It's a terrific thing to be able to help facilitate, help be a part of, and then to behold the successes that come from strong partnerships like that.
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the things you've been involved with and have you explain your role with these organizations. I'd like you to tell me a little bit about Rainbow House.
Rainbow House, let's see, I think that was in 1977 or 1978. And Rainbow House was a child abuse prevention program. And it was a crisis nursery where if one were to feel kind of at wit's end and had any concern that crisis they were facing might end up with in any way neglecting or abusing their child, they could remove their child from that risk by simply taking them to Rainbow House. And Rainbow House was a crisis nursery that was open 24/7. They just simply had to make a phone call to the taxi company with whom we had a partnership. The cab would pick them up and take them over to the Rainbow House, which was our partnership with the Tulsa, what was called the VOTEC at that time. And we had staff there that would care for them 24/7 until this crisis could be dissipated and the parent could come back for them. And then when the parents would come back, we could refer them to different educational programs, different community resources, all to help them maybe prevent that kind of situation from happening again, or for knowing where to go and how to access established community services should that situation arise again. Unfortunately, Rainbow House was probably ahead of its time. That was at a time, I remember clearly, where the subject of child abuse wasn't even acceptable social conversation. It was, I suppose there was some fear about it, and thankfully we've gotten over that so that we can help the children that need help. But it was a great grassroots experience, and I want to give you some flavor of that because I'm really very proud of how the community responded to that. McDonald's, as you know, is a big company, and certainly was then. So we were all just stay-at-home moms and just had, and this idea born on coffee table talk in the morning. What can we do to help the situation? I think we're all volunteers with DHS and the Children's Protection Registry at DHS, and so this is something we came up with DHS. But we didn't know how to ask for money or raise money or anything, and so I don't even know how we walked into McDonald's and asked, told them what we were doing and asked them what they could do. Well, this man we happened to be able to talk to was a franchisee and had like 3 or 4 McDonald's, and what ended up happening was, for I think 2 or 3 days in a certain time period, McDonald's permitted Rainbow House volunteers to come in, and we were behind the counter, and we would serve all the customers that walked in. And previous to that, we could sell these tickets that McDonald's gave us. And I don't think we had to pay for any of it. We could sell tickets for a meal, whatever the set meal was that they were promoting, for $5. And we sold them everywhere, all over the community. And then for those 2 or 3 days when they could redeem those tickets, the volunteers would be behind the counter. We had our little gingham aprons and, our rainbow emblem. So it was fabulous. In terms of a fundraiser, it raised, at that time I think it raised $50,000, which was a lot of money, but it also raised so much awareness because everybody went to McDonald's, and here we had fathers and wives and older children serving the community McDonald's food, and so that was a great story. But again, it was ahead of its time, and at some point there just wasn't the funding available, and we had to close it. I was present at the time, and it was probably one of the hardest things I'd ever done, to have to go to a staff who was very passionate and very committed to what they were doing, and to have to let them go because we couldn't raise the money to do it. But that was it ended up merging with what was then the Children's Registry at Hillcrest Medical Center, which then merged with Parents Anonymous, which is now the Parent Child Center, which is a wonderful facility here in Tulsa that is involved with prevention and education and parenting education.
Well, what a great thing for the community, even in a short time span, to help open the doors.
I think it was that. I really think it was the catalyst for the great programs we have in Tulsa now. I don't know whether or not you know, but Tulsa has model programs in the area of child abuse. Child Abuse Network is an organization I'm involved with now, and that program has been replicated in Israel.
That's impressive.
It is impressive, and I think there's one in Jerusalem now, and another one due to be built soon. So we have model programs in that. So I like to think that Rainbow House was, although we probably made some people uncomfortable, that it did raise the question, and it did put the issue on the table.
Well, I'd like you to tell me a little bit about the National Conference for Community Justice and the Oklahoma Conference for Community Justice, if you could.
Oh, I'd love to tell you about that. The National Conference, it started off as the National Conference for Christians and Jews. I think that's how most people know it. It became, a few years ago, the National Conference for Community Justice, so that it could be more inclusive and include Muslims and other religions. But about 4 years ago, National was experiencing some financial trouble. Long story, but the bottom line of it is that today, I don't know how many regions are left with National. They continue to exist, but most of us have gone on and become independent. Those of us who have successfully become independent organizations have recently, this year, gotten back together and formed the National Federation for Just Communities. It's a federation versus a national organization that has a parent organization that has the 501c3. So we're all independent, yet in this federation we choose to come together to form a network where we can find and be resources to one another. And I'm happy to say that it is from coast to coast that we have these, and we help, and we're growing too. So and it's a much different kind of climate of sharing rather than being obligated. and everyone comes up with wonderful, innovative programs. The Oklahoma Conference for Community and Justice became independent in 2 years ago, and we finally got a 501c3 a few months ago. We would not have been able to do this were it not for the help of this incredible Tulsa community, and critical to that would be the Tulsa Community Foundation. They sheltered us while we sought our independent status so that we continue to have donors. We also embarked on a capital campaign, not for building a building, but for operations. We asked for 2 years of operating money, 1 year to operate, and 1 year to hold in reserve to operate the following year, so that when we were able to survive, we had still another year to get our feet on the ground and be healthy. And that's exactly what happened. We were able to raise that money. Over the last 2 years, we've had that ability to become stable, and we're embarking now on the year that we all thought was a dream, and it has come true, where we can now grow and begin to outreach. The office in Oklahoma City closed several years before, and so we are, this year, it's a goal, it's an important goal, to reopen services in Oklahoma City and other parts of Oklahoma, because we think that this is a mission that is important everywhere, and I guess I should do that mission. Our mission is to fight bias, bigotry, and prejudice anywhere it exists through education and advocacy. And I think we are the only organization in Oklahoma with a singular mission to do that. And I've said this, I said this often during our Futures campaign, that there are definitely social problems that will occur for always. But no matter how good the solutions may be to those problems, that we may come up with those problems, that unless we are willing to deal with the inherent underlying issues of human relations, that those solutions can never really be implemented effectively unless we've dealt with the human relations conflict that just are inherent in a diverse society. And we have a diverse society that we should value. We want a diverse society, but within that diversity are diversity of opinions. And if we don't first lay groundwork for mutual respect for differing opinions, I don't know how we can get to then addressing solutions. So that is what I think is the most important thing about OCCJ, is that our mission is such that it is in the background. It underlies all the important issues we face. And you may not even see the importance of our work unless we're not working right. If our work is going well, and if there's someone like us doing the kind of work we do, then things move along much more smoothly. Unfortunately, that's in a perfect world, and that doesn't happen. So conflict does arise. This organization is, thankfully here still today, and of service to anyone. Most recently, the mayor and the police chief have asked us to work with them on a police community relations program, which I don't know if you know, there has been some conflict between the city and the police officers over the last few years. And so this is a very important program that would be put in place. The city and police department really do want to work for better community law enforcement relationships, and that's not unique to Tulsa. I mean, you can read about it in the paper in any city, but the fact that in Tulsa we do want to be actively addressing that, and then that they would ask OCCJ to help them, I think speaks very well of the organization.
Now, do community members, groups come to OCCJ, or does OCCJ actively pursue interests in Tulsa?
Come to OCCJ for?
Like the police.
Yes, they do. But I will have to say that our board has always been this way. The chief of police is a board member. Mm-hmm. The mayor is an honorary director, as is the governor. Our Attorney General of Oklahoma is an honorary director. So we have, and I think that really speaks to their understanding of the importance of having an organization that has the kind of gravitas that can call people together, call people to the table, and to talk about conflict before it erupts in some unmanageable form. And so we have corporate CEOs on our board, all the faith leaders on our board of all faiths. The leaders of the different faith communities are on our board, and so we already are a place where people have agreed to come to the table. So, but when there's, sometimes things don't hurt unless it's hurting you. But by being present at the table already, hopefully you've expressed a commitment to staying at the table, even when the hurt is you.
Mm-hmm. Sure. That's great. That's great that Tulsans could get together like that and mobilize the forces. And it seems like such a great community that it could do that.
You're absolutely right. That also was an incredible experience, and I was lucky to be part of it. And I guess it could have gone both ways, but I think those of us on the executive committee that year just never faltered. We just never had any doubt that the community understood the importance of our mission and the importance of mobilizing and coming together to help us survive. And in fact, indeed they did.
That's great. How important is volunteering to you?
There was a time, I suppose every generation feels like they've lived through a place and time that was transforming, and have. The transformation that has occurred during my young adult and where I am today as an older adult is that the profile of a volunteer has very much changed. As a younger adult, there were a lot of stay-at-home mothers, and so there was a ready volunteer workforce. My daughter's generation are mostly working mothers, and so they don't have the same time to do the same kind of volunteer work. And I provide that as backdrop because when I was a volunteer, when I was a younger adult, I remember at that time it was the people who were working who were smart and sophisticated and knew everything and could do anything and were, just knew more. And we were just housewives who volunteered. I don't feel that way anymore. And I think most enlightened people do not. As a matter of fact, an argument could really be made that volunteers may be a stronger manager because they don't have a salary or anything to compel you to work. As a volunteer leader, you have to find some other way to making people want to be there and want to work and want to give you their time. And I think oftentimes people from a volunteer environment, a nonprofit environment, if you will, they have better meeting management skills because they have to let all be heard, and no one has to be there, and they have to make people excited about whatever committee they're chairing. Whereas in a corporate world, and mind you, I have one foot in each world, and so I find it fascinating. In a corporate world, they have reason. They can make you come to work, right? And at a meeting, they can make you feel not that important, what you have to say versus somebody. There's always a 900-pound gorilla in the room in a corporate world. Or in a volunteer world, it's much more like a team effort for being there. So when you say how important it is, I believe that working women and men in a corporate world have a lot to learn and gain by involving themselves in community work. And at One Oak, we promote that. We encourage that. We encourage all our employees to be involved in the community. And I think there's a lot to be gained. They may think that they have all the skill sets. And I'm not meaning this critically. One may think they have all the skill sets if they're really successful in a corporate world. And I think once they get in the volunteer world, I think they realize how much there is for them to learn in terms of working with other people and working together for common goals that are not motivated by anything other than doing the right thing. You know, they're not motivated by a monetary bonus at the end of it. Conversely, I think people in the volunteer world can learn a lot from corporate skills in terms of, on volunteer boards, we're always looking for someone with financial skills or accounting skills or PR skills or public affairs skills. So I think those of us who are just in the volunteer world can certainly learn a lot from the skill sets that people from the corporate world bring on our boards. So I think there's that partnership between community and corporate that is so important, and I think that one really cannot succeed without the other, at least not that effectively, because the truth is, nonprofit right now is a business. Philanthropy is one of the fastest growing businesses in the country, or in the world, and so I think both have to understand the important role they play in raising the other up.
Have you ever been in a situation where you've had to convince somebody or a group of people to do something and they were kind of hesitant, and say you did a good sales job and they did that volunteer gig and they came back to you and they said, "Oh, I'm so glad we did that"?
I think we've had those experiences. I think a lot of us have had those kinds of epiphanies, if you will. But sometimes it doesn't happen, and sometimes you expect an experience like that and you don't get it. Sometimes you know ahead that that's not what you're going to get, and that's fine, although it might disappoint the other person if you say no. But the truth is, just like it is in all life, there are matches and there are not matches. And I think the important thing to find when you volunteer is a good match for you, because not only do you, when you're invited on a board, for instance, there's something they want from you, you know, some skill set, some resource, something that you have that could advantage that board. Well, that's fine. But I think that board also has a responsibility to give back to you. That there's something that you gain as a person from that experience. Could be a skill set, could be just the satisfaction of knowing, you know, that you've contributed to something. Whatever it is, I believe that the really good relationships are when the volunteer knows that there's something in that for him. He's gained something. His life has been enriched, or he's grown in some way from that experience. And then the board that he serves on has also gained from his participation on that board. But yes, sometimes, well, the question you ask, really, I can answer personally. I remember being in an organization where we call it placement, you know, and so placement every year, you answer this list of things. These are the committees I've done, these are the committees I'd like to do sometime, these are the committees I never want to do. Well, on this committees I never wanted to do, I never wanted to be the editor of our magazine. I never wanted to do public relations, and I never, ever wanted to do public affairs. Well, I ended up being editor of the magazine. I ended up being chairman of the Public Relations Committee. Two skill sets that have helped me work more effectively in the job I have today. And to my great regret, I didn't have time. I never did work on the Public Affairs Committee, because today I realize that if you want to make any real change, any real permanent change, you have to be willing to get involved in the political system. You have to be willing, and I never was, and so I successfully avoided it, but it was to my great disadvantage that I did. So when you say, do you ever have to talk someone into it, and you know they find that it was good for them, sometimes it is good to get talked into something. Because I think, that's the wonderful thing about volunteer work, maybe a little more so than the corporate world, because you get to try new things in a safer environment, and you usually have a lot of support and a lot of a lot of latitude to try some things, maybe not, maybe fail a little bit and do better again, but you have a lot of opportunity to discover new dimensions of yourself that you might not have otherwise, which might be scary in the corporate world because there's, a job rating that goes with it.
Just listening to you speak about not going into the public affairs realm, I guess there's no hope that you'll run for Tulsa mayor or
None.
public office.
None.
Just checking.
None.
Tell me about any stumbling blocks or adversity that you faced along the way in your career.
Let's see. It's interesting because I am of a different ethnicity, but it had nothing to do with that. But it still was about being an outsider. When I came to One Oak, I was an outsider. It was a company. Our company is a wonderful company with a 100-year legacy. At the time I came in, though, everybody was homegrown, meaning that even our CEO at the time came in at a certain level and kind of grew his way up. Okay. And I don't know that managers were hired from the outside, and I was hired in as a manager, but I was hired in to do a pretty cool job from the outside, and it wasn't posted inside, and so there was no chance for anyone inside who many of them had been there forever, who felt they never had a chance at it, and here I was an outsider. That was probably difficult. But it's not unlike, the other outsider, insider things that we deal with. But that was pretty tough because I was an outsider in a company of a lot of insiders, a lot of family, a lot of people who'd been there together, and having to somehow make my way. And I never thought about it till just now, but that I guess it's not unlike the rest of my life, coming to the United States and doing that. And so perhaps, as God has infinite wisdom, perhaps that was His way of preparing me for those experiences that I were to have later in life.
Well, tell me about a key moment in your career, whether it's in your volunteer career or in your professional career, if that's the right term, that you consider one of your biggest highlights. And if you have more than one, that's okay too.
Getting through this interview. Let's see. I've really had a lot of great experiences, but I guess highlights where, if you mean those occasions where there should be confetti falling and everybody celebrating, I guess a couple of those I could point out. One is the Child Abuse Network. I didn't know this at the time they invited me to serve on the board, but they could have been closing their doors at any time. It's hardly ever the cause. It's sometimes being able to find the funding to continue the cause. And so the Child Abuse Network, I don't know if you know about it, and if you don't mind, could I take just a minute
Please.
to say the Child Abuse Network is, for child abuse, there's a spectrum of services. And there's prevention, and then there's the prosecution of perpetrators. Child Abuse Network gets involved only when the abuse has actually been reported. And so our work is to aid in the determination of abuse, and then to aid in the assessment and the prosecution of the alleged perpetrators. It's a very unique, and hopefully not so unique, less unique as years go by, because hopefully it'll be replicated. I already told you it's replicated in Israel. It's a co-location of the police department's child protection unit, child crisis unit, the DHS's children's protection unit, of the OU medical clinic pediatrics unit, The district attorney has an office there, so it's a wonderful co-location of people who will deal with determining if there's been abuse and going after the perpetrator if the abuse is proven. It's expensive venture because of the co-location of all those agencies. And, child abuse still, it's a lot easier just to pick them up and lock them up, instead of, do the forensic evidence and all that, which ultimately saves taxpayer money and is more fair to all the parties involved and really protects the children. It also provides a one-stop place for the child, so they don't have to go to the police department and give testimony. They don't have to go to DHS and give another testimony. They don't have to. So for the child, it was the best thing to do. But I didn't realize, and I'd been involved with it before as it grew because it really was born out of a community survey that was led by the Junior League of Tulsa 10 years prior, and I was involved in it at that time. So here it is 10 years later, and as often happens in nonprofits, they were struggling for money. And I was invited to serve on a nominating committee where they had a structure where they had people who were not on board and people on board on a nominating committee. It's a very wise nominating structure. Little did I know from that nominating committee, I would be asked on the board and then be vice president of development that very next year, which I did, given the interest I'd had in the cause for a long time. Rainbow House preceding it by some 10 years, 15 years. So I did, and I'll never forget the executive director. One of made a contribution of $5,000, and she started crying. And I didn't realize why. And it was because with that $5,000, she'd keep the doors open another month. And that's what happens sometimes with nonprofits. That's why when you ask about heroics, in a volunteer world, really, when you volunteer for good causes that help people, it's easy to see heroics happen all the time. Really ordinary people like me get a chance to be involved in situations that may be kind of heroic, at least in terms of saving and helping the people it does. Anyway, all that to say, I did that, and I think a year later I was chairman of the board. But it is true that the board that we had at the time and the board that came on, the board that we had, the executive committee officers, everybody was so dedicated to it. And within those 2 or 3 years, we kept Child Abuse Network together. We were able to call in other community resources. And the Child Abuse Network today is very strong and very healthy, and is now to be the anchor piece in what OU Tulsa is calling their children's park, where they will have not only the Child Abuse Network and its collated agencies, but co-location on this entire campus of other organizations dedicated to children's health and children's well-being. So there'll be all kinds of minds, which is geared towards children's education. There'll be, I can't remember the other things that were named. So, in the Child Abuse Network is to be the anchor of that campus of other organizations that really fight for children's well-being. So we're very proud of that. And so that was, at the end of that 3 years, I remember, I just remember a huge celebration by everybody because, there was money in reserve, which is always good, and our executive director was still there, and we managed to give her a staff, a couple of staff people, and so that was one of those hoorays for sure. Another one probably was the Oklahoma Conference for Community and Justice, because National had dwindled $40 million to 22, and then 2 years dwindled that to 4.5, I think, and they were going to close some regions. We were one of them. We got notice the week before Thanksgiving, I think, and we called our executive committee together, and we made a decision that we would seek independence, and we would make it Oklahoma-owned, because we thought that the mission was just too important to let it go. So we did that Futures campaign. It worked. We our programs never ceased. We continued with the programs. We did a lot on faith. We did a lot. We could not have done any of it without the community. None of it. And 2 years after that, I happened to be chairman at that time, or president. I don't remember what we're called. But as I was stepping off the position, we had just we had accomplished our independence. And I remember writing a letter to all the board that it was how I felt, that so few times in life are all the right people at the right place at the right time doing the right thing. And so that was a real hurrah. And we had a reception. One Oak also gave OCCJ free office space. And so they are now office in our lower level. And we had a huge reception with these huge balloons, and we had our office blessed. And so the rabbi was there, and then the Bishop Slattery, representing the Catholic Diocese, was there. And then we had Cheryl Siddiqui, representing the Islamic Society, was there, and they all gave a prayer and blessed the place. We had there were 4 entities in Tulsa without whom this could not have happened, and one of them was Tulsa Community Foundation, who I told you sheltered us, and the Williams Company, who is one of the biggest companies in Oklahoma also, gave us a lead gift of $100,000 in that Futures campaign, and lent to us one of its brilliant Michael Johnson to serve on our board and lead our campaign. And then One Oak, who not only gave us a huge donation, but also the office space, but also a lot of good guidance throughout the process. And then the Tulsa World. Tulsa World was the very first place we went to after that executive committee, well, after the board voted to seek independence. We went to them and we said, here's who we are, and we need your help in letting the community know that we need help. And so we were in the paper every week, and every month, and they really documented our progress and helped us ask for the right kind of help. And so those 4 entities, we could not have done it without. They were all 4 there, and they all said something. And so that was a time when it was like, the confetti ship and falling, and we really all celebrated, because it was one of those rare opportunities, at least in my world, where the right people, the right time, the right place, the right thing. So that was pretty cool.
Well, let's turn to the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame. When you were notified that you were going to be inducted, what was going through your mind?
Gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh, I was very surprised. I was very surprised. As a matter of fact, it was not. I was very surprised. And I can't remember how I found out. Do you know?
I don't.
I think it was Jennifer who told me, and I think she ended up. Well, I don't even remember. But it is true what I tell you. I kind of go on in life, and I'm really just lucky. But I was just shocked, because I know I have several friends who are previous inductees, and they have high-level positions in their companies or their world, and they have really broad reach. Like I told you about the 2 that I had I'd nominated in previous years who were inducted. I was proud to say, one of them's reach is international, and the other's reach is to be the highest-ranking woman law enforcement officer in the state of Oklahoma at some time. So, I have no idea how, but I of course, am very honored. And I'm still stuttering about it, aren't I?
You were very modest.
I am still stuttering about it.
Well, do you remember who presented you at the ceremony?
I asked my daughter to present me. And it was never a question. About who, when they said you'll have to ask someone to present you, I just thought, I mean, for a lot of reasons. I'm crazy about my daughter. I think she's one of the finest human beings I know, as well as is my son. But because she is also a woman, you know, she came readily to mind. But I have this really one of the things I love about Tulsa is you can be in Tulsa, Utica Square, and see generations of families. So I love it when I see, you know, a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter, and a grandchild, you know, all there. And so that probably played into my mind, you know, is that I wouldn't be there were it not for, you know, the generations, my generations. And so my daughter was a ready choice, and I didn't tell her anything. I just asked her to present me. I had lots of friends who said, you know, if she needs any help, have her call me. To my knowledge, she never called anybody. But she did. She would have done anybody of any stature or position honor. I mean, she was just terrific. She told on me a lot. I was very proud of her. And after she did her presentation, I remember this because the way it was the presenter would speak while you were standing there. So you had to stand there the whole time someone's talking about you. You had to stand kind of next to them, and I found that a little bit uncomfortable. But I enjoyed her speech because she was so engaged with it. I mean, she was really good. I mean, if I were just an objective critical eye, she did a great speech. I mean, she did a great presentation. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed what she said immensely, and not really because it had anything to do with me, although I enjoyed thinking that she would say those things, but because she just did such a great job. And so when she's through, then the format was that, you know, then the honoree would speak. Well, the audience got up after she spoke, and I knew it was for her. It wasn't because, you know, of who she was introducing. I knew it was. I mean, I would have stood up in the audience if I'd been listening to her. And so I turned to her and I just kind of stepped back. And I remember doing this. I remember doing it. I just stepped back, and because I wanted her to know that ovation was for her, because she did such a great job. So, yeah, she's an incredible woman. The one thing she did tell on me, though, is I tell her the story, and, you know, she hears the story about introvert, extrovert. And she said that, I think she said her mother was an introvert, although nobody believes it, that, you know, she said, my mother can work a room, but if you give her a choice, and I say this about myself, so I can remember what she said, if you give her a choice, she'll choose her two best friends in the room and she'll just stay with them. And she said, I happen to know that oftentimes my mother's two best friends are a rerun of Law and Order and a good glass of Cabernet. But she did tell on me some too, but she did a great job.
Well, that's great.
I'd love to turn the table someday and do that about her, but, you know, I probably couldn't get through it, and she got through it perfectly.
Well, you seem very touched and just overwhelmed.
Oh, I was.
What does this type of honor mean to you?
You know, I remember when I was thinking about asking my daughter to present me, that the honor was also meaningful because of the example it gives to, and it was my daughter I was thinking of at the time, but, you know, I think an honor like that is an example for others to follow. Not that you're trying to set one, but it is something that can be held up as a way, you know, a life can be. And I remember that, sorry, about my daughter. And then my granddaughter was in the audience, and she got to see her mother speak. And so I was thinking that's an example for my granddaughter too, and I think that's how life goes. Whatever example we choose to set, and we in fact set one.
Well, how do you feel that now women look at you as that role model?
Oh gosh. I hope they see more than when they see me just a role model. Maybe just as somebody that they, that represents values and demonstrates capacities that they I don't know word enjoy, or that they enjoy knowing. I like being around. I feel a real responsibility for mentoring, and not necessarily in an active sense. Not like saying I'm going to mentor that person, but just if you have a sense that that person has this, looks to you in any way that way, I think that you need to sense that, and to know the responsibility that comes with that, which means, I guess, being responsive to them, and being accessible and available, but also in a way that is really sisterly and not as a mother superior, where it seems, I just think it needs to be user-friendly to be a mentor. Otherwise, maybe the person you're mentoring presents themselves as not so accessible and a little bit unattainable, and I don't think it should be this way. I think our mentoring among women should be sisterly.
Well, that's a great approach. But it's interesting how you use the term user-friendly when it comes to mentoring. That's a really great way to look at it.
Well, I do think this way about those relationships. When you think about mentoring relationships, you're usually thinking about a mentor and a mentoree. And, that the learning is one way. And I don't see it that way. I really see it as they do us a favor, those of us who are the mentor, whether or not the mentor be older. Sometimes I don't think the mentor is necessarily older. They do us a favor too, because they're so re-energizing, and they offer fresh perspectives, often from another generation or another background, that we might not have ever had, were that relationship not formed. So, although the information they may be seeking from you is one of a knowledge base, they have a knowledge base too that the mentor may not have. I find it very reaffirming, very, I just find it it gives me hope. I always look on the next generation that way. I said that to somebody the other day. As a matter of fact, when we walked in that restaurant and I waved to that young man from India, I said it to him the other night, that people like him make me hopeful. That, here I am of this generation older than he, and that when the time does come that we leave the place of work, or the place of, place of business, or the place of involvement, or this place, that I know I'll feel really good that we are leaving, whatever we're leaving, in really good hands.
Now, I usually ask this question one way, but for you, I have to ask it a little different, because I just get this great sense that you have such pride in this city, and it's a very unique feeling that you just emanate about Tulsa. Just seeing you walking around the city and greeting everybody with a smile, and how everybody's waving to you from their cars. I just think that's amazing. But I want to know what Tulsa and what Oklahoma means to you.
I have no idea. Perhaps I was searching for this and didn't even know it. Being an Army brat, searching for a place, that you could say you're from, or because I never had that growing up, and I know that I love that for my children. That my children can say that they were born, raised, grew up, went to school in one place, and that no matter where they go, they always have these friends that they were, 5-year-olds with, 5th graders with, that I never had, because I don't recall a friend from childhood. Probably not one until maybe high school, maybe late high school, which is just the way my life was. It's not better or not as good, but the way my life was. So maybe I was always searching for Tulsa, someplace to be from, and maybe I claim it because my children are from here, and so I can claim it too. But what I do believe about Tulsa is that it has great community spirit, and I think that is not just an emotional sense I'm giving you. I think it's well documented. Our United Way here, it has one of the highest increasing ratios in the country every year. Our annual increase is higher. It's in the top 10% of everyone in the country. Our United Way is that way. I told you we have model programs in child abuse prevention, just little old Tulsa. We have model programs in that. We have model programs in several social services. We're not known for it because we don't necessarily talk about it, but we do it. I think that in Tulsa, the spirit is if there's something that needs to be done, it's all hands on deck. You just get on deck, do your part. You may not be able to do it all, but you do your part, and it'll get done. And I just think there's a real sense of community in Tulsa. That's possible because I think there is a willingness to work together across lines. Sure, sometimes there's conflict. Sure, sometimes there's not the willingness. But I think there are really level voices in this community. There's leadership in this community that even when there is conflict like that, there are voices that most of us will listen to and follow, that can bring almost all of us to a table to resolve some problem. I think Tulsa is very unique and special. And I don't know that I think that, but I think also testimony to that. And I live here, but I've lived other places. So the Junior League here, I'm rambling now, but when I was in the Junior League, I was a regional officer, so I got to go to different Junior Leagues. I always thought all Junior Leagues were the same, but no. Our Junior League really was special. We really thought, we were thoughtful, we were considerate, and we were very committed, we were active, and we accomplished what we would set out to do.
Well, would you like to take some time out to say something or to mention the people you would like to recognize or thank that have helped played an important role in your life?
Oh my gosh, I don't know if you have that much time. There are so many people who have played an important role in my life. Certainly every volunteer. I think most life-affecting for me were a couple of experiences and all the people that were involved in those experiences. And one of them I have to say is really the Junior League of Tulsa. I don't think it has anymore the kind of societal image that it used to have of white gloves, but it was one of the most edifying experiences of my life. But again, I'll repeat, the Junior League of Tulsa was very different, and we really did. The mission of the Junior League at one time was to train volunteers for community service. That mission changed to providing trained volunteers for community service. I think that made a completely different organization. I was lucky. I was a member at the time where we trained volunteers, and I was trained at the Junior League. They provided me incredible training. So that was very life-affecting for me. It was very edifying. It really gave me a skill set so that I could travel across that spectrum of introvert, extrovert, because I had a skill set to present in an extroverted manner. Leadership Oklahoma was another one. It's an organization that takes you all across the state and introduces you to issues at statewide levels and hopefully prepares you to be interested in and to participate in the political system, if you will, in issues that, in broad issues, overarching issues that involve common education, health services, like that. And so that was very edifying for me too. And I did learn one thing in that experience. This is really true. I was in that room and do you know about Leadership Oklahoma?
No, I do not.
It is an organization that I think it says, I don't think these are not my words, of proven leaders, and to prepare them for participation in statewide issues and affairs. And so, in my particular class he was at the time U.S. Representative J.C. Watts. I'll stop naming, sorry. But a lot of really highly intelligent people and leaders from across the state were in there. And I remember sitting in a class program one day, and they were talking about the healthcare, how complicated that is. And I was sitting there thinking, oh my God, these people are so smart. What am I doing here? Really. They were so smart, and they could see clearly through the problem, and they could crystallize it down to some solution. And almost at a moment, I realized what I was doing there. I was the pedestrian, albeit an informed, a well-informed pedestrian. I was the pedestrian in the room that said, that sounds dandy. Now, say it in words where I can understand what you're saying, and then make me give a darn about it. And I realized that there does have to be those of us who can somehow understand it, but somehow also understand that if you don't, that there are a lot of us who don't understand it, and that no matter how good you say it, no matter how good the solution you come up with, if you cannot communicate it down, and if you cannot make people care about it, it doesn't really do any good. So I learned that was really a place I could play, and a contribution I could make. So that was also a very edifying experience for me, is to know that place and know a value of that role that I could play, and to be real comfortable with it. And I am real comfortable with that role. Maybe I do it too much. So those were two organizations that were really life-changing for me, and all the leaders that I got to work with in there. My mother probably is the singular biggest influence in my life. As with all mother-daughter relationships, there are ways in which you're alike and ways in which you're very different. But I aspired to be like my mother in all the ways that, in a lot of the ways that were very different, which is surprising, which may sound surprising, but it's really not. She's very strong and fiercely loyal, and just an incredible human being. My daughter is also another very influential person in my life, as is my son, but in terms of being well, my son is too, being a woman, learning from both of them. But the person that I have decided that I want to live a long life for, I've never really thought about living a long life, you live as long as you can, but I've decided I want to live as long as I possibly can. It's because I want to see my granddaughter grow up. She is a pistol, and I want to see all the things that she gets done in her life. She is incredible. She's going to be incredible. So those are probably faith has always been really important in my life, and so the people I work with in from faith communities are very influential in terms of teaching me about acceptance and being still, but knowing when not to be still, being quiet, but knowing when, you mustn't be quiet. So, I hope that answers your question.
What would be your advice to women who plan on following in your footsteps?
Don't follow in my footsteps.
Why not?
Make your own. Make your own.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I mean, there are great adventures to be had, and, probably greater where there are not already footsteps, as Robert Frost says so much more eloquently in his poem.
Well, you're still working very diligently with WANOC. What do you foresee yourself doing in the future? What's next on the agenda?
Knitting. You know, I don't know. I am at that place where I'd like to think about retirement. And what would I do where I retired? I'd like to do all the things that I probably didn't have the chance to do when I was younger, which is not a unique story. But I mean, one thing I would love to do but won't do. I would love to go to a third world country and help. But I probably won't because of the health risk. And I wouldn't want to bring any of that back to my grandchildren or bring it back and somehow be limited in time I could spend with them. And I know that might be an extreme thinking, but yet any degree of possibility of that happening would keep me from doing that. But it is something that were I younger and were there not other people in my life that I would want to be concerned with, I probably would do like a mini Peace Corps thing. But I would not, I'd love to go over and do like summers and teach English in some of these underdeveloped countries. I'd like to do that. I do have this degree in nursing. It would be fun to be an adjunct professor. We have nursing programs at both OU Tulsa and TU, and it would be fun to teach a nursing leadership course. Not any clinicals. I never say I'm a nurse. I always say I have a degree in nursing because I would not offend the profession that way. I've never really nursed. But I think that would be fun to be involved again with students, in a student kind of relationship. That'd be fun. I thought about, but I think this would be too much work. It would be, given the job I have, I listen to a lot of people who bring grant proposals. And I always have felt part of my job is to help them know how to make the proposals excellent and to learn at least how we like to receive information, but to give them some information that, hopefully will broaden their thinking about what makes a good proposal specific to a particular funder. So kind of toyed the idea with maybe after retirement, partnering with 2 or 3 other people and providing that kind of service, consultation to nonprofits and to companies about how to help nonprofit be more excellent. I think that'd be kind of a fun thing to do and still provide, some kind of service to mankind. And then at the end of this, I think about just knitting and just playing with the grandchildren. I have 4 now. And I'd love to be able to do that, just to go when I want to go and be with the grandkids. But I think maybe there's a way to have it all, to be able to do, hopefully, if I'm retired, if I've retired wisely, I can do that, do part-time, whatever else it is I want to do, and still be available to family more than I am now.
Well, if anybody could do it, I'm sure you can. Well, in closing today, is there anything you would like to mention or say that I have not asked you about or that you would like to include?
I don't think so. I've sure enjoyed talking to you. I really have, and I really appreciate your making this comfortable for me to do. I'm sure I've just rambled, but you've not let me think that, so perhaps the only thing that I would want to mention is that I've kind of joked about this for a while now, but it really isn't. I mean, it really is something that seriously can happen. Even before I moved here, I've said to friends, at some point it's going to be just us girls. And we ought to find a compound where we can all live, still independently, but still, close enough to each other. There's a pool in the middle or something where we can all be together. And so this may be it, because there are other condominiums here in this community available. And I already have a couple of girlfriends here, and so we're trying to talk anymore. But it provides a metaphor for how I feel about girlfriends. And I know I would feel this way even if I were married at this moment. And I think I'll still feel this way if by chance I'm in another relationship down the road. But I think women, I can't, no, I have to say this more specifically, not broadly, not just women, but I think girlfriends are a family group that I think we recognize sometimes, but I'd like to recognize them. I think girlfriends are a family group that I could not have made it many times, and certainly over the last few years without girlfriends. I mean, there's just something about women friends that is strong and loyal and true and always there. And I think I would like to recognize that. I'm so lucky. I have a wonderful family of girlfriends. We're not, and I think girlfriends really understand how difficult life, jobs, family, any situation can be for another woman, and they know how to be supportive through that.
Great support system. Well, I think that's a great way to end this interview. I do appreciate your time today and contributing to our project. Thank you very much.
You're